July 17th, 1980. The Bolsheviks lead Czar Nicholas II and his family into a basement in Yekaterinburg. What if, in that chaotic moment, the bullets missed and the last Russian emperor escaped death? A single heartbeat of chance separating tragedy from possibility. In today's video, we're exploring a history that never happened. A world where Nicholas II survived that fateful night. The Russian Civil War takes a dramatic turn, monarchists gain a rallying point, and the entire 20th century unfolds along an alternate path. Join me as we follow this historical thread through a tapestry of what-ifs, discovering how one man's survival could have rewritten history. The basement escape, how Nicholas could have survived. Picture this. It's the early morning hours of July 17th, 1918. The Romanov family has been awakened, told to dress, and led to a small basement room in the Ipatiev house in Yekaterinburg. The dimly lit chamber, barely 20 feet by 16 feet, feels suffocating as Nicholas II, his wife Alexandra, their 5 children and 4 loyal servants arrange themselves against the wall. The air is thick with tension as Yakov Yurovsky, the commandant, enters with his executioner squad, a mix of Bolshevik guards, some visibly intoxicated, others nervously fingering their weapons. What if this wasn't the end of the Romanov dynasty? What if, in those chaotic moments, history took a different turn? Hearts pounding, the family huddled closer as Yurovsky read the death sentence. The execution was chaotic and inefficient. When the firing squad raised their weapons, the initial volley created a dense cloud of gunpowder smoke that temporarily blinded the executioners. Several of the Romanov daughters survived the first round. Their bodices, sewn with diamonds and jewels, deflected bullets like primitive body armor. In this confusion, Nicholas might have found a momentary opportunity. Perhaps one guard, there were known monarchist sympathizers among the Bolsheviks, deliberately missed his shot. The basement had a small window that hadn't properly been secured. During the ensuing bayonet attack, when executioners realized bullets hadn't finished their job, Nicholas might have slipped away in the smoky chaos, wounded but alive. Royal escapes from doom do have historical precedent. Unlike Louis XVI, his brother Louis XVIII successfully escaped France during Revolution and later reclaimed the throne. Emperor Wilhelm II of Germany fled to neutral Netherlands as his empire collapsed just months after Nicholas's imprisonment, demonstrating how even surrounded monarchs could escape their captors. The Romanovs had potential saviors. Nicholas's royal relatives across Europe included the kings of England, Denmark, and Greece. British intelligence officers had documented rescue plans in motion. Most failed due to poor coordination, but if Nicholas alone had escaped the basement, these networks might have extracted him. The Ipatiev house wasn't impenetrable. Guards drank on duty. The perimeter fence had gaps. Local monarchist sympathizers had smuggled items to the family, creating plausible escape scenarios. Had Nicholas survived, the Bolsheviks would have faced a crisis. They initially announced only that Nicholas the Bloody had been executed, keeping the family's fate secret for days. This uncertainty sparked immediate survival rumors. Imagine if those rumors were true. A fleeing Nicholas could have adopted a disguise, perhaps as a soldier or priest. Loyalist networks existed throughout Russia, from aristocratic safe houses to Orthodox monasteries. The Siberian wilderness offered countless routes towards Vladivostok and escape by sea. Our point of divergence: what if Nicholas alone escaped while his family perished? A man who once ruled 1/6 of Earth's landmass, now a grieving fugitive with nothing but his name and scattered supporters' loyalty. Civil war transformed the living symbol of monarchy. A surviving Tsar would have transformed the Russian Civil War overnight. In mid-1918, the anti-Bolshevik White forces were fighting communists while battling their own internal divisions. The White Coalition resembled a patchwork quilt ready to unravel. Monarchists yearning for their old Russia, liberals pursuing Western-style democracy, and military strongmen harboring personal ambitions. These factions agreed on opposing Lenin, but little else, creating a fatal weakness the more unified Red Army repeatedly exploited. Now imagine dropping Nicholas II, alive, grieving, but still the anointed emperor of all Russia, into this fractured resistance movement. For monarchist officers and soldiers, many of whom wrote the Tsar's initials on their uniforms even after his reported death, Nicholas would represent divine validation. Their fight would transform from an abstract political struggle to a sacred mission to restore their living sovereign to his rightful throne. But Nicholas would simultaneously unite and divide. The moderate and liberal elements of the White movement had no desire to restore autocracy. Many had celebrated his abdication the previous year and viewed his policies as directly responsible for Russia's collapse. These factions would face an impossible choice: accept a leader they fundamentally opposed, or fragment the already fragile anti-Bolshevik alliance further. Military questions would create equally significant tensions. Would Nicholas attempt to assume direct command of white forces despite his disastrous track record as commander-in-chief during World War I? As Tsar, military leadership was his divine right, yet generals like Anton Denikin might publicly pledge loyalty while privately maintaining control of their own armies, creating dangerous divisions in the wide command structure. Admiral Kolchak in Siberia presents a particularly compelling case. Could a man who declared himself supreme ruler of Russia reconcile his ambitions with serving as the Tsar's defender? This tension between legitimate authority and military reality would strain the White Movement profoundly. Foreign powers would face equally difficult decisions about supporting a restored monarch versus backing various warlords. For Britain especially, with King George V having previously denied his cousin asylum, this would create painful diplomatic contradictions. The Bolsheviks would confront their worst nightmare, a living embodiment of the order they claimed to have destroyed. Lenin would understand the dangerous symbolic power Nicholas represented to a deeply religious peasant population, still viewing the Tsar as little father. Could Nicholas's personal grief over his family transform him into a more effective leader? The man who famously dismissed the 1905 Bloody Sunday massacre might emerge changed by surviving his family's execution and witnessing his empire's destruction. Would trauma create a more pragmatic ruler, or would Nicholas double down on the divine right principles that contributed to his downfall? From potential sanctuary in monarchist Siberia, a transformed Nicholas might redefine Russia's future, or repeat the mistakes that cost him his throne. Internal ripple effects, a world responding to royal survival. Beyond Russia's borders, news of the Tsar's escape would have travelled through royal telegrams like wildfire, forcing his cousin King George V to confront an impossible question. How do you explain to the world why you denied asylum to a relative who survived an execution you could have prevented? The royal courts of Europe were family in 1918. Nicholas II was Queen Victoria's grandson-in-law through his wife Alexandra, King George's first cousin, and Kaiser Wilhelm's second cousin, a family drama playing out on the world stage. King George V had already made his painful calculation once. When Nicholas first sought sanctuary in Britain after his abdication, George initially supported the idea. But as the political winds shifted, so did the king's resolve. British politicians warned that hosting the deposed Tsar might inflame revolutionary sentiment at home. Public opinion had turned sharply against offering asylum to Nicholas. As a constitutional monarch, George felt compelled to bow to these pressures, a decision that would haunt him when reports of his cousin's execution reached London. The sudden reappearance of Nicholas would send diplomatic shockwaves across Europe. The British royal family would face excruciating scrutiny, having effectively abandoned their Russian relatives to revolutionaries. Would George offer belated sanctuary to make amends for his earlier failure? Or would political reality force him to abandon his cousin a second time? This personal dilemma would quickly transform into a geopolitical crisis, with each royal court forced to choose between blood ties and political survival. Denmark presented a logical refuge, given that Nicholas's mother was Danish royalty. From there, a shadow Russian court could maintain continuity, issuing proclamations and serving as a rallying point for monarchist forces. The Vatican would likely have supported Nicholas despite differences in faith. Papal backing could have influenced Catholic countries to recognize his government in exile, creating a powerful counterweight to the Bolsheviks. Germany's position would be especially complex. Though officially at war with Russia until the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, the Kaiser might have seen strategic value in supporting his cousin after the Great War. A restored Romanov dynasty would have been preferable to a revolutionary Soviet state, exporting communism across European borders. The Versailles Peace Conference in 1919 would face unprecedented complications. Would Nicholas attend as Russia's legitimate head of state? Or would Allied powers recognize Soviet representatives? The presence of dual Russian delegations, each claiming legitimacy, would upend treaty negotiations and territorial settlements throughout Eastern Europe. This diplomatic entanglement would create a recognition crisis with practical consequences. International organizations, trade agreements, and treaties would all be complicated by questions of which Russia was the real one, leaving the European continent divided between nations backing Nicholas and those pragmatically dealing with the Bolsheviks' government that controlled most Russian territory. Conclusion. The execution of the Romanovs wasn't just another political assassination. It was a hinge point that fundamentally altered Russia's trajectory. The Bolsheviks' decision to eliminate this potential rallying symbol for counter-revolutionaries proved strategically effective, yet ironically pushed many Russians to yearn for the monarch they'd once rejected. This singular moment in that Yekaterinburg basement carries enormous historical weight. Had Nicholas survived, Russia might have evolved into a constitutional monarchy like Spain or Greece after their revolutions. What if that cellar door had never closed? The Russian Revolution reminds us how choices made in a single, fateful moment can cascade into world-changing consequences. Your small decisions, like subscribing to AltHistoryZone, can also cascade into world-changing consequences. Remember, knowledge is power, and those who do not know history are bound to repeat it. Stay tuned.